You are a spiritual being in physical form, a dichotomy of light and dark, where energy equals mass on a journey designed to fulfill our personal legend and purpose, to use humanity throughout, to amplify and transcend, slay the ego, raise the humanity. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the High Vibe Zone. Hey, oh, hey.
That is my favorite intro.
It's a fun intro. I like it too. It's definitely can be considered like a vibe intro, something you want to definitely vibe to. Welcome, LinkedIn, YouTube. You have now entered the High Vibe Zone. I'm here with my very special guest, Maria Vargas, and we are going to be talking about High on the Hog. I hear feedback. I don't know if
It sounds okay on my end.
Okay. Maybe it's just me. Let me know, LinkedIn, YouTube world, if y'all are hearing any feedback, but we're going to keep going. We are continuing the conversation about this amazing docuseries on Netflix called High on the Hog, how African cuisine transformed what we know as food in America and also other areas too, which is what we're going to be talking about today. This episode is specifically about rice. And I mean, who would have thought? And if you have not watched High on the Hog, y'all, I highly recommend watching it. It is such a beautiful, transcending docuseries that does paint the picture of history from another lens, but it also gives you opportunity to transcend into something deeper and knowledge. And so it's a really good one. So if you are joining us for the first time in the High Vibe Zone, welcome. Go ahead and drop your name, location. What are you grateful for? We want to know those things. And if this is not your first time in the High Vibe Zone, oh my goodness, thank you for being with us. You've chosen correctly. And if you're watching this as a recording, awesome. Still leave us comments. Still let us know what you think. But we're going to jump into it. You ready, Maria?
Let's do it.
Okay. But we got to start with our encouraging card of the day. We have no idea what it's going to be. I'm going to shuffle it. But while I shuffle, Maria, what are you grateful for?
Oh, well, it's always hard for me to just come up with one thing. But I am grateful for just being in the present. And I think as the world is slowly opening up again, and I think we're getting pulled in many directions again, and it's just really nice to just be in the present at home or in your office, wherever you are, and just be grounded and just really immersed in the moment. So I think I'm grateful for that today.
Nice. I like that. I like the addressing the presentness and how that's where all the sweet stuff is. We don't even know it yet. We don't know it until it's usually in the past, but
yeah,
the past
well,
is also the present.
Yeah, well, it's like we're always so just like it's easy to regret the past and easy to be anxious about the future. And so just being really just mindful about the moment that we're living in right now. And like, we're in the high vibe zone. Like, that's a great place to be.
It is a great place to be, the high vibe zone, where we are a dichotomy. No, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do the intro again. We'll do the intro and the outro because it's fun. It's a great listen. While you were talking, I pulled a card, but before I show it, I will state that there's a lot of shifting happening in my household right now. And so I am grateful for those moments of peace and clarity, because it sometimes can seem like things aren't flowing in the way that I want them to flow, as an ego wants them to flow, but they are always flowing in the direction in which they should be. And so I'm just grateful for those moments like this. There's no kids talking. It's like very silent and peaceful. And so I am grateful, again, being present. I am here. And so kind of piggybacking off of what you said.
There we go.
Yes. All right. Shall we see the encouraging card of the day?
Yes, Watch it be present.
Oh, I don't know what it is. I didn't even look at it. It says, make room for good things. Okay. We are talking about food today. So I'm gonna let you take this one. Make room for good things. It doesn't necessarily have to be food, but like what stands out to you about this encouraging card?
I hadn't even thought of food until you mentioned it, but that's like now the first thing that pops into my mind is like, what am I gonna make room for today for dinner or lunch? I think a lot of times maybe we saturate our own days with just the regular work, maybe work out, maybe like, spend time with your family. And sometimes I think we forget to make room for ourselves and making room for good things, as in like the self-care kind of aspect, but it's just like keeping yourself, again, like what could make your day for you better, so that way you can fill your cup to give to others. And good things, of course, things that are fun, things that are meaningful, but just remembering that like we crowd our room a lot with other things, and it's important to just create the space. And I know that's something you do, is like if we have a crazy day of meetings or a crazy week, it's like, where can we create this extra space? Should we organize the room? Like, is it messy? What is going on? Because there's an expression my dad uses, and he's always like, it's in Spanish, but it would translate something like, if everything's organized, it all fits. And so it's like, you can always make room for things if you know how to organize it correctly. And so I think that's what comes to mind. And the good can mean a lot of things to different people, but it's essentially, I guess, what would make you happy in that moment, or what you need in that moment.
I love that. How do you say it in Spanish?
He says, todo en orden cabe.
Todo en orden cabe.
Everything in order fits.
Very wise father you have there.
When I was moving, I was like, nothing's gonna fit in my room. He's like, todo en orden cabe.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much, man. That's really wise. It's true. And I really like what you said is, we tend to make room for things that might not necessarily make us feel good or have a good effect on us. And it's so important to remind ourselves that, yes, we must fill up first before we give to others. There's this book that I'm reading. It's not around me right now, but it's called The 5 a.m. Club. And it talks about own your morning, like change your life kind of thing. And it's like waking up at a certain time. And for me, I really value the time that I wake up, because if I wake up a little bit later, everybody is up. And there's really no space and time for me to ground and come back to center and make room for those good things, which is giving gratitude, or going to ground, or going for a run, or making some tea and just sitting with it and just being like, okay, what am I thinking about today? So beautiful card. And then, I mean, the first thing I thought about was food, and, making room for good things, and food is equally important. And so on that note, let's transition into talking about episode 2, High on the Hog. For those that have not seen it, the base of it is around rice. And it talks about, I'll do a little synopsis. It talks about how Benin in Africa was known for the slave trade, and people from parts of Africa were taken or sold to harvest rice in the US. And I think one of the first places they landed was in the Carolinas. And so I have a couple of notes from the show, and they were talking about how it was like 100 million pounds of rice a year that were being harvested. That's a lot of rice. And apparently, if you go from space, you can see the land that was moved to make these fields to to harvest rice, and there was more land moved to make rice than was moved to build the pyramids in Egypt. Like, that really shows the magnitude of what was actually happening back then. And it was all done through slavery.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing too, there is like in school we're taught about cash crops, for example, cotton, rice.
Yeah.
Rice was one of them, but what was never taught is the other side of that is the wealth of knowledge of the people who grew it, who were Africans, who were enslaved people brought over to do that exact thing. And I think rice and culture is such a contribution to what it means to be in American society, or like American cuisine in itself. And knowing the history of something like rice is so important. It's in so many cuisines, like Asian cuisine and Latin American cuisine. It's American cuisine. It's African cuisine. It's just everywhere.
Yeah, it is really fascinating. And growing up, I would have never associated Africa with rice. I just was like, oh, okay. I mean, and then I would always associate slavery and cotton, never slavery and rice, or slavery and okra, or slavery, like whatever was, brought over. I would have never associated it with that. One other thing I learned was the core function of braiding hair. They would weave in seeds into braided hair, and I had no idea. I was like, wait a minute, why am I seeing these images of seeds in braided hair? And that's how they would get that over, so they could start to plant or carry it over. And it would be inconspicuous. You wouldn't really be able to see it, but that's where you would see different patterns of braids, and they would have seeds in them. So when they got to where they were going, they could take out their hair and plant and grow from there. Which I thought was,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's just so much history that isn't taught or isn't really known. And that's such like a pivotal crop in American society and in building the wealth of our nation, which was predominantly agricultural based for so long. And I mean, largely still is.
Yeah, I think what we learned a part of that agriculture, and then we also learned about the which was more on the West Coast, which was the mining and the gold and that. And so between those two things, which obviously the agriculture part was a lot bigger, that started to establish what we currently have in America. And I love how you mentioned how it's so much tied in. Rice is like in so many cultures. One would assume rice would be like Asia. I mean, when I went to Bali, there was beautiful rice paddy fields out there. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Would have never thought that the way that rice got over to there was through the Africans that were enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
Had no idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. And to see that representation everywhere, it just shows us that there's more that connects us than separates us.
100%. And rice is that. Rice is, I was in New York City last week, and I was staying in Harlem, and I was just like finding stuff on Yelp, trying to find a good place to eat. And I'm vegan, so I was looking for like vegetarian or vegan friendly restaurants, and one popped up like right up like 5 stars, and it was called New York City Field Trip. And I was like, I wonder what that is. So I went on a Yelp review like thing, and it was like, this chef, I think his name is Chef JJ, and he founded this company, this restaurant called Rice's Culture. And in the description, it's like rice is such an ancient grain, part of so many cultures. And it was his concept of the restaurant was born from the realization that rice connects us. And it's at the center of tables in pretty much every community across the world. And so all of the plates at the restaurant have a different type of rice. And I had jollof rice, which I believe is tomato based, and tomatoes came from Latin America, and then they made their way into Africa and then back. So it's just all the ingredients. It's like, food is just a movement of ingredients, ideas, and people, and the more those things move around, the better it gets. And I think for American society, sometimes we say, oh, like American food is what, like a cheeseburger? No, like African food is American food, Latin American, or like Latin food is Latin American food, and just all these cultures, and it's so foundational to each independent culture, but also as a whole in the United States. We just like absorb everything.
Yeah, it's really true. And we should definitely put a link to Field Trip, or is it called Field Trip or is it Rice's Culture?
It's called New York City Field Trip.
Okay, we can definitely put links to it for those that are on the East Coast watching, for sure. Definitely check out that restaurant because that's amazing. What better way to learn about humanity and culture than to eat it?
Yeah.
And I think that's huge because when you think about food, and one of the other things that I really loved about this episode was they talk about one pot meals. And I never really got like growing up, I remember the one pot meal that I grew up on was like Hamburger Helper. My mom would like make Hamburger Helper and it would be like in one pot, or she'd make like a stroganoff or something simple. But one pot meals came from the enslaved and they would have just one thing, one pot. And they would make these meals. What I thought was so fascinating, one thing that I learned from this episode was how you actually taste the food, which I thought was really cool. And I don't have a spoon to demonstrate, so just imagine I have an invisible spoon, y'all. Is basically you take the spoon and then you dip it into whatever you want to taste, and you put it on your wrist and you taste it that way. You don't put the spoon in your mouth. And I mean, because you think about it, if you only had one spoon and you have one pot, you don't want to cross-contaminate. And it was such a really cool thing to see. And I forget his name, but he pointed out the only way we would learn how to do that is if it was passed down. Just like the only way we would know how to make a certain recipe is that it would be passed down. We made my great-great-grandmother's gumbo recipe together, which was really awesome. And the only way that I knew how to do it is because it was passed down. And it's through the transfer of knowledge and the unity in our community, and also the safetiness that food brings us. Because if we don't feel safe, we don't eat. It's a mechanism. We won't chew if we don't feel safe. And so to have food at the center that connects us all, and like rice be one of those things that you never really think of. I will never look at rice the same.
Yeah, not at all. I love that you said that. And in the film, they talked about, just the importance of things being passed down from generation to generation. And right now, like there was a clip in there. There was like, they were tearing a house down to build a highway. Yeah. And we're losing a lot of that generational knowledge. And I resonate with that as well, because on my dad's side, my grandma is an excellent cook, and from her mother and her mother and her mother. And it just like has been going down the line. And what my grandma wanted to do was capture all these family recipes and put them in a cookbook. So she's actually published 2 or 3 cookbooks with family recipes, and somewhere in there, like, we have a mix of like a little bit of like Creole, like some other African and also Middle Eastern descendants. And so a lot of the recipes do have those different ingredients and flavors. And so for me, it just feels wonderful to have that in a book.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love how through the capturing of stories, and also through the translation of food, that you can preserve what we know as our roots. And what's really cool about roots, and something my husband pointed out, was there's not just one root that grounds the tree. There are so many roots that are attached to that tree. And so as you mentioned, like there's other cultures within encompassing of your culture. Those are the roots that ground, because maybe you have I mean, we all have something of something in us, whether it's 0.5% or whatever. That just means that there was a connection, something happened, and cultures just blended. And it's really important to discover those cultures. And I think through the versatility and the diversity of rice, it's a really great journey to go on. And I think you could probably make this a whole year project if you decided to take rice from different cultures, make that meal, and learn about that culture, which would be a really cool project.
Yeah, and here's the thing: it's like food, especially specifically rice, just crosses borders and interacts with the cultures so fluidly that suddenly we have, yes, like we can call rice by its name, but you have so many different types of rice, and every culture interacts with them differently and brings on different flavors. So suddenly it's like we have a bunch of different rice, and that's just what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah, I think in the episode they were talking about the Carolina Gold, which that part really. Next time I'm going to take names down because I am not that great with names, but I'll link it in the comments, I'm sure. And essentially, Carolina Gold, there's a factory out in the Carolinas, and it's run by this white guy, and he owns the seed. But what's really cool is he doesn't have a patent on the seed, so he will give the seed away to anyone that he feels like that's not trying to make a profit off the seed. So, I mean, if they rightfully show okay, hey, I'd really like this seed to do X, Y, and Z, he will give that seed away, which is really cool. And Stephen had asked him, he's like, how does it feel to do you feel like there's some conflict here? He's like, absolutely. I'm building a business off of something that was never mine, and that wouldn't exist unless slavery happened. And he was very, the way that he said it was so beautiful, and you could hear that, yes, he deals with conflict as a white person dealing with something that came over from slavery. But what I love about how he's doing it is he reinvests a lot into the community, and he's willing to give the seed away. And while it won't make up, and it's not for him to make up anything that happened in slavery, but he's just has this beautiful awareness. And I just thought about what if more leaders were like that, in the sense of, yeah, we hear about being self-made and all of these things, and it's not true. None of us, yes, we are destined to become where we're going, but a lot of us have had help. A lot of us have had other people to really uplift or do the work, or really I don't know, I just found it really interesting. I can see it in my mind, but I can't articulate just the beauty of how he articulated the fact that, yes, I'm profiting off of something terrible that happened, and this is what I've decided to do with the access that I have.
I think he was if you watch that scene, it's he was very respectful of it, but you can also see he has a real joy and passion for rice. And so if you're anyone who has that sort of passion and joy towards something, and you're able to respectfully, acknowledge the history and also put your own twist on it and bring it back into the community and into the hands of more people, then why shouldn't you do that? Regardless of your skin color, as long as you're respectful about it. And it seems he was very knowledgeable about it as well.
Yeah, I think he said it was one of his mom's favorite things, and he got into it for her, and obviously knowing the history. But I love how he said, as long as you're respectful, and that's a whole topic on itself, is just being respectful. And we all know what respect looks like. It's just having it enough to where it broadens out for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think respect is free, right? I don't think it costs anything.
I don't think so. People think it does. Maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's one of those free things like kindness and
Yes.
Anyway,
I actually wanted to share this book. So I read this almost 2 years ago. It's called You and I Eat the Same. And it's a great book for anybody to read on the ways that food and cooking connect us with one another. And it's like a bunch of little stories. They have one on rice. They have one on like how every culture has like pocket foods, like tacos and empanadas and all these things. And it's just, if you're interested in anybody listening into these topics, I highly recommend it.
Nice. Yeah, well, we should link it in the comments so people can easily find it. Okay, I want to make sure we talk about this last piece because it blew my mind. And I'm not going particularly in sequence of the show, but there was a portion talking about Gullah and the Gullah people. And I remember very distinctly as a young kid watching a show called Gullah Gullah Island. And I can even hear it's like, do you want to go to Gullah Gullah Island? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It had like a yellow frog and it was like always talking about different things. And it was one of my favorite shows growing up. I didn't realize that Gullah was real. I didn't realize that was until watching this show, y'all, which I watched it, I think was the first time last month or something. So Gullah is a culture in itself, and the Gullah people are so joyful, they are beautiful storytellers and passers of the culture and how to cook. Gullah cooking is so big. They talk about the mullet fish in Gullah cooking and the way that they have so much respect for the food. They ended up doing a whole thing around a hog, which the whole series is called High on the Hog. And they talk about how when the pigs were slaughtered, there would be a certain portion that would go to their master, and then they would get the scraps of, like, the enslaved would get the scraps of the pig. But what was really amazing to witness in this series was the scraps. They took it and turned it into something amazing to feed their families. And I just think about that type of resiliency that had to happen in the culture. And I see that resiliency throughout a lot of other cultures as well. I see it through the Colombian culture. I was reading a story the other day, hashtag Maria's Colombian. So I was like, let me tie that in there. I was reading a story the other day of someone talking about their experience of their dad coming to America from Colombia and like all of the going back and forth and being young and getting out in time, like all of these things, and coming to this place and being able to create something amazing. And I see that resiliency through our entire humanity. It's not exclusive to a person's circumstance. It is embedded in our humanity. And when we tap in, when we get tapped in, tuned in, we can do some amazing things. And I really loved hearing how, yes, we were given the scraps, but we made a cuisine out of it. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was really beautiful, of just that beautiful, like that transition from being in a disempowered position to a place of empowerment. And I mean, for me, that's what stuck a lot from that episode, and just seeing the joy and everything like that. So yeah.
No, I love that you shared that. And it wasn't that they just made a meal to serve. I mean, of course, it was like a meal to survive the everyday, but it was also, it ended up being a cuisine, as you just said. It was more than just that one day to get, or that one meal to get through the day. It ended up being a large thing. And I mean, in the video, they talked about like the descendants of the enslaved, like, are still cooking it. It's a cuisine, and it's an experience, and it's kind of like a ritual, and it's just something. Yeah, it's great. And I believe the Gullah are like on the East Coast, like Florida, Georgia, and like I grew up in Florida, and I'd never heard of this, and it just made me think like, wow, there's so much even there that we didn't know, and that can still be, experienced.
Yeah, and still be taught. And again, the teaching of it doesn't need to be heavy. It can be balanced. It's like that's I feel that's how I, at least for me, it's the best way for me to absorb information, because if you're just bogged down with like super heavy, it makes it really hard to just see the beauty in it. And I love how in this episode they did talk about, like, yes, slavery was not a beautiful thing at all, but out of that came some of the most beautiful things that we experience today, and we don't even think about it, or we don't even, some aren't even aware, and some don't think about it, and we're, again, it's making room for good things. And yes, these are good things to talk about. They're good things to teach people. They're good things to go out and explore for yourself. And so as we slowly close up this conversation, talking about Rice Kingdom from High on the Hog, I cannot encourage y'all enough to go watch this show. It is so good. And I think I'd like to end with, what is your favorite rice dish?
Oh gosh. I actually love a good fried rice. I love soy sauce and just like so I just make like, I guess it's more Asian style fried rice, I guess. Yeah. But that's my favorite. But I haven't really experimented with different grains. I always go for like the short grain brown rice. But I think after watching High on the Hog, I'm just like so curious to see, like, just go to the store or go to like some of the ethnic stores and like see what other rice is out there and just try it. Yeah, so I'm excited for that.
Nice.
What is your favorite rice?
Huh?
What is your favorite rice?
Jambalaya. I love a jambalaya dish. And I've used different types of rice for jambalaya, but I like very similar to fried rice. It has a bunch of other stuff in there. And I find all the stuff that's in a jambalaya very delicious. And it has I like the heat. You said soy sauce. I like the heat a little bit of a jambalaya. So I would say that would be my favorite rice dish.
I think we're both making room for rice tonight.
Yeah,
but you should make room in Netflix to watch High on the Hog.
Yes, room for rice and Netflix. Okay. I'd love for you to, and you always have amazing things to say, and I'd love to just pass it on to you to close us out for in our high vibe zone. What pieces of takeaway would you like to just leave our viewers, listeners with?
I would say, I guess in terms of what we just watched or what we just discussed of the Rice Kingdom and High on the Hog, I think just just realizing that African Americans, like, their food are foundational to American culture, and it's like African American food is American food, and it's foundational to what we call American food. So that's one side of it. And I would also say that what makes the U.S. and pretty special is that our national food culture is capable of just absorbing influences from other cultures and other people and evolving over time and changing. And I think that a lot of times we're like, oh, what is the American culture? Or what is the American diet? What is the American cuisine? And it's every cuisine with a twist. And everyone has its own origin story as to how we eat it today. Maybe it's your family's recipe. Maybe it's like a new version of it. And I think that's what makes it really exciting. So now when people ask, like, what is the American cuisine? It's like, it's every cuisine with a twist.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my God, it's so good. It's a beautiful start. Maybe we should definitely do some cooking live on something, bring some food together. We'll figure it out. But thank you so much, Maria, for being my awesome special guest. And thank you to everyone who watched or is watching. And I want to send y'all out with the blessing of light, love, and gratitude. Thank you so much for your day. Go enjoy a beautiful, amazing rice dish, whether you make it yourself, buy it from somewhere else. And we will see you next week, same time in the High Vibe Zone. Talk to y'all later. Bye. Let's hit that super sick outro.
Yes.
Let's do it. You are a spiritual being in physical form, a dichotomy of light and dark, where energy equals mass on a journey designed to fulfill our personal legend and purpose, to use humanity throughout, to amplify and transcend, slay the ego, raise the humanity. That's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the High Vibe Zone.